Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Telemedia 8.1, sorry, Studio 8.1. You'd think after 55 episodes, I'd know the name of it. This is our vodcast. That's a video podcast with vodka. That's not vodka. It's not vodka. With me, Jarvis, Todd, publisher of Telemedia Magazine, Telemedia News, Telemedia Online, all things Telemedia, and my old mate, Paul Skeldon, who is the editor and the wordsmith and the guy that so it helps you out every 2 weeks by picking the four or five, actually quite a bit, five or six most interesting stories that come across his desk. And we take a slightly deeper dive into what that means for our industry. If you don't know what telemedia is, it's the world of value-added services, premium content, in-app billing. We talk about how that's delivered, how it's marketed, and even more importantly, perhaps how consumers are able to pay for it with all those clever payment gateways and platforms that are on offer through the telemedia industry. Hello, Paul.
Hello, mate. Hello.
I should say we're broadcasting live from the sunny UK where we're approaching 30 degrees, but we're used to that kind of weather, so that's why we're looking so suntan. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about in brief. We're going to discuss how AI is coming to a business near you right now. I know we've been going on about AI for quite some time, but it really does seem to be taking hold in quite a big way. Starting with RCS, and then we're going to be talking about also we're going to be talking about how embedded payments are starting to grow. And there's also some more good news coming from the MENA region as Telecom Egypt tackle voice fraud. And we were talking about robocalling a couple of weeks ago, and so that comes into it quite nicely. And we might just finish off with a little bit of the latest news that we've got from World Telemedia, which is, of course, where the entire telemedia industry, or all the people that count, make a pilgrimage to sunny Marbella on the 6th, 7th, and 8th of October for 3 days of high-end business networking, intelligence gathering, and a fair degree of business networking, it's fair to say. So if you have not got your ticket for World Telemedia, or if you have not booked your sponsorship or branded meeting space, please, at the end of this podcast, drop me an email, jarvis@worldtelemedia.co.uk, and we'll get you sorted out. Anyway, so Paul, without further ado, let's crack on. So
let's indeed.
Let's do it. The first story reads: Infobip integrates Google Vertex AI into RCS to offer conversational AI. Now, it's interesting. We haven't heard from Infobip for a while. Major messaging provider, often an advertiser visitor at World Telemedia. They're a global communications platform, and they offer businesses and brands access to conversational AI and AI-enabled chatbots on RCS business messaging through new integration with, in this case, Google Vertex AI. Now, before Paul takes us into this story, which also leads into another story, what I would say here, Paul, there's a lot. We've been talking about RCS a lot. And it's no surprise, of course, that AI is now getting fully enabling the sort of potential of that. And we've been extolling the virtues of this form of messaging for quite some time. However, before you crack on, I would say, again, as I mentioned probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, when I very proudly bought my brand new Samsung S24, and I promised you I'd keep you up to date with whether or not at this stage I had received anything that even vaguely looked like an RCS message. And I'm very sorry to tell you that I've drawn a blank. So, Paul,
still zero.
We've been, it's all very well. I just wonder, there's a lot of this kind of positive PR has been coming out around RCS and brands for such a long time. When's it going to start? When's it going to really kick off?
Well, it's coming. It will come. I think it's more prevalent in the US, to be frank. There aren't that many brands here in the UK who are actively using RCS. Asda, I believe, are.
Yeah.
There are others doing various trials of it around Europe. But yes, I think it's a slow burn. I think when Apple integrate it into their next iOS update in September, we're going to start seeing it sort of pick up, but probably not until the beginning of 2025. I would have thought. I think it needs that sort of the publicity it's probably going to get around that rollout in September. I think that's going to make brands think, well, we're going to do this. I think what's happening in the background is companies like Infobip are working away on RCS, developing and adding to it. So I think when brands do start to look at it with more seriousness and start to do it, it is going to offer potentially a really amazingly different experience to what business messaging looks like currently. So yeah, we've been talking. I mean, obviously, we've been talking about it for a really long time because that's the kind of, it comes across in our world, frequently. So we've been talking about it for a long time. I think as far as the wider world's concerned, it's very new and no one really has heard of it outside of the telecoms industry. So I think, no, you haven't received any messages yet. You probably will start to, but probably not until 2025. But it will. And I think eventually we may well be sitting here in a year's time, sort of next summer, marveling at the kind of level of RCS messaging you're getting and how you very rarely now use text. But we shall see. So I think it's a bit of a slow burn, but I think that's because it seems like a long time to us because we're much more involved in that world. I think really it's I mean, it has, to be fair, taken us 10 years to get to this point as far as sort of Google is concerned. But I think as far as the man in the street or woman in the street is concerned, they haven't heard of it. It's not new. It'll suddenly appear and they'll go, wow.
Okay. Well, I promise I will keep everyone updated and look out for a big LinkedIn announcement when I do finally receive my RCS.
If there's anyone out there who can do it, send him a message
right now.
RCS him now, someone, please.
Please. So, I mean, obviously, but in principle, we're talking about RCS being a very, almost like sort of email on the SMS platform. So very interactive, a very good sales and marketing tool, a very good way of engaging with your consumer. So, very good for customer service. And I guess, with Vertex AI from Google, this is just going to make it even better than it was when it first, the story about RCS first came out. So I think this is definitely an area that we need to watch, and I do agree with you, and I think we made the point that probably by October we'd be talking to companies like Meshads and Google about how they're suggesting that their customers start to use this amazing technology. But as I say, you're probably also right. Telemedia companies have traditionally been quite quick to adopt new technologies, so we're probably going to see some workable examples of this by the time we get to Marbella. Now, let's assume, of course, that this is going to happen. The next story talks about and as I said, AI has been kind of ubiquitous in almost all of our podcasts now for about a couple of years. I remember when it first started, we were thinking, this is all a bit pie in the sky. And now it's infected or enhancing, I should say, every area of the telemedia industry. Now, the next story talks about the ethics of that. Which of course is a hot topic when you're talking about AI. And this, I think, I'm just wondering whether or not this is kind of, I hate to say it, like a bit of puff, because there's a Twilio report that's come out and it says, well, AI is going to be great, but to be competitive, you've got to be ethical. Now, every story that seems to be surrounding AI is talking about how it could be a force for good, but generally speaking, people are really quite nervous about this. So the story reads: consumer demand shifts business leaders' focus to predictive, emotionally intelligent, and customized engagements driven by AI. But getting it right ethically and securely is now a business imperative, driving personalization. So I think, Paul, that's kind of obvious, but I wonder whether or not it's a reality. I think in other words, I wonder whether or not companies feel that they have to sort of talk about the virtues of AI whilst kind of brushing so it's almost like saying, we've got it, but don't worry, we're only going to, it's only going to be used for good here. I wonder whether
Mm.
or not that's necessarily true.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the sort of first story about Infobip. I mean, they've just basically added Google's AI to RCS to offer an AI backed chatbot offering, really, for anyone who's going to use RCS as a business messaging thing. Because, as the Twilio report reveals, because the report I pulled out in the Twilio report this idea about AI being a business imperative if done ethically, but really the whole report is about personalization of marketing. What research finds is that Gen Z, particularly, but not just them, increasingly want this much more engaged way of interacting with brands. And of course, brands, most of them can't do that unless they have it automated. And now you can automate it so it seems pretty slick and quite sophisticated using AI. That's what Infobip is adding to RCS. I think that's quite a strong business proposition for Infobip's RCS messaging, because it comes with a sort of built-in, reasonably good AI-backed chatbot, which will just get better as the AI improves. I think, yes, you're right to some degree that, of course, it has to be done ethically. And I think the Twilio research that does find that 89% of the businesses they spoke to believe that ethical AI is a business advantage. I mean, yes, you're right. That is, of course, it is like unethical, but it's not going to be a business. Well, it probably is in the short term, but if you get caught out, it's not a business advantage when you're in prison. So, to some degree, yes, it's stating the obvious, but I do think that it does make an interesting point that businesses now recognize that they need to use AI, and they need to use it to drive personalization at scale, because you can't deliver the degree of personalization that consumers expect now, particularly the Generation Z ones, and the generations behind them will be even more demanding of it, without automating it. And the only way to do that in any way competitively is to use AI to underpin it. So I think it just shows how important this actually is to all businesses and all marketing, that you need to use AI. And I guess reports like this stress that it's got to be done ethically. Now, obviously, we've covered a lot of stuff about AI and how it's used in fraud. I think what this is referring to is those grey areas where it might not be unethical, but might look a little bit dodgy. I mean, where do you draw the line in what AI is doing? Is it pretending to be a person, or do you have to tell like a consumer or a customer up front that you are talking to an AI, not a person? It just sounds like a person. In which case, why are you bothering to make it sound like a person if you're telling them it? Do you see what I mean? I think
Exactly.
so. I think it's that area of like total confusion that this report is trying to sort of unpick. And I think businesses recognise that they're not there yet, and I think we're going to come through all sorts of turbulence before we actually get to this being a part of everyday life. Well, it is already a part of everyday life, but do you know what I mean? It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you entirely. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of how, it's a business imperative now to be, eco-friendly, a company. And of course, now we're getting sort of all kinds of areas, particularly in things like fashion and retail, where companies have been going out specifically to appeal to the, particularly the Gen Zs and the millennials, and by saying, well, buy from us because we're an eco-friendly company, but in fact, they're not. And I wonder whether or not this is almost running parallel, and is almost a similar journey.
Well, that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because yes, that's greenwashing. I wonder if we're going to have AI washing.
AI washing,
AI washing. Because who's to say that people are going to go, you're talking to an AI, and we know that, and we're being very careful with your data, when in fact they're not. Sort of thing. Absolutely. Or they'll be the other way around. They'll make you believe you're talking to a person when you're not. Or you're talking to a person who's being prompted by AI. Where does that sort of sit in the ethics?
Very confusing. Well, I mean, we did talk about this with the robocalling, didn't we, a little bit a few weeks ago. But I mean, what also struck me about this, and perhaps in line with what we've just been saying, the report, by the way, this is the 5th annual State of Personalization report, and you'll find a link to that on below this website, wherever you happen to view your website, your vodcast. But it was an interesting point here, and it says more than half, 54% of business leaders said that they are addressing consumer concerns around data privacy and ethical considerations in AI by implementing robust privacy controls. That means that 46% are not.
Are not doing it, yeah.
That's
Which
almost
is pretty much
half.
half, isn't it?
And
Half of
so,
them aren't.
that kind of says it all, really. I mean, you would be wanting to see that figure up in the sort of 90s, wouldn't you?
You would like to think so, yeah.
You don't really give a so anyway, so look, watch out for more AI within the telemedia sector. We will obviously continue to report as and when we see interesting stories. I suspect that this will be a recurring topic. Right, I don't know what's happened to me today.
It's the vodka.
Right the way through till Telemedia in Marbella, as I said, which is in October. Now, obviously, as we said earlier, the very sort of central part of telemedia is the ability, once you've been able to engage that consumer, is to get them to buy stuff and give them really, really easy ways to pay for things, not make them jump through too many hoops, because then they get bored and then they abandon their baskets. Telemedia is a fantastic way of engaging and converting large numbers of consumers with all kinds of really fantastic content. Now, the next story is based on payments, and we're talking about embedded payment transactions to surpass $2.5 trillion globally by 2028. Not that long, 4 years away, and that is going to be driven by A2A. The story reads, payments embedded in apps and other online platforms will explode as consumers embrace them. But it will be account-to-account payments that will make it happen, says Juniper. This report is the Global Embedded Finance Markets 2024 to 2028 from our good friends at Juniper. You can again download a copy of that or extracts from that at the bottom of this vodcast. So, Paul, am I right in thinking this is an open banking story?
It is an open banking story. It's interesting, I think, because it's about integrating payments into sort of the apps where people are using them. And I think by extension, how those payments can increasingly just be embedded into the process of doing stuff. So I've long gone on about the sort of one of the kind of sort of key aims, really, if you're trying to sell things to people, is to make payments as easy as possible. And people like Uber do it really well because it's totally embedded in the process. You don't actually appear to pay. You just book a Uber, get in it, get out. The money is taken from you. And I think this integrated payments, embedded payments into apps, particularly sort of commerce ones, is another step towards that. It becomes like a one-click checkout option. It runs account to account. It's cheaper and easier to do than ever before, thanks to instant banking, instant payments rather, and open banking. And I think it's sort of, it's an interesting new development around how you charge for stuff in apps, which impacts telemedia because it's where people are consuming. So they're consuming content. They're buying content. They're it's sort of, I guess it also impacts sort of the broader e-commerce sort of world where you're buying stuff whilst in apps. And I do wonder where it sort of leaves things like carrier billing. I mean, there's always going to be a place for carrier billing. I do wonder whether there's a risk that if this sort of thing really takes off, which account-to-account payments appear to be doing because they're so easy to do, and banks are starting to really realise that this is an interesting new sort of revenue stream for them because they can offer at scale. They don't have to charge very much for doing it, so it becomes a much cheaper payment option, much easier for consumers than cards and faffing about stuff. Possibly, is this going to erode some of DCB's sort of recent gains in that it suddenly becomes even easier to do than carrier billing does, certainly in more developed markets, I think, where more people have bank accounts. So really, yeah, it's a question I'm posing rather than having an answer. I think this could be a disruptor for some of the sort of key telemedia billing services. That said, talking to people at the last Telemedia event we did in Barcelona around Mobile World Congress, lots of the payment companies, that they're talking not just about carrier billing, they're talking about carrier billing and other alternative payment methods, including open banking and instant payments. So I think we might start to see a shift in how those payments are taken and what it means to be a sort of payment provider in our industry, what you can offer with that.
Mm. Well, I mean, thankfully, as I said earlier, the traditional sort of focal point for the telemedia had been the ability to be able to bill for premium services using primarily DCB or some other kind of operator-driven, mobile operator or telecom operator-driven payment mechanism, including back in the days IPRN, although that's still around, and even premium rate. What I thought was interesting about this particular story, and we have been extolling the virtues of open banking for about 2 years now, or yeah, nearly 2 years.
More, I think.
The research author Matthew Purnell comments transparent instant payments embedded in checkout reduces cart abandonment due to increased efficiency and consumer satisfaction. Now, what's interesting is that line could have been associated with DCB, or has and is associated with DCB right now today. So, it really illustrates the parallel in that, well, what the imperatives are for consumers is that it's got to be secure, instant, and a satisfying and easy experience to reduce abandonment. And therefore, as you say, there's no reason why this and other payment mechanisms wouldn't sit
Quite
alongside each other, because they all offer similar sort of benefits. However, the cost is going to be a big thing here, because obviously DCB is a little bit more expensive, and certainly the implication is that banks are going to be offering this at a much lower rate for the merchant, right? Now, irrespective of whether or not the payment landscape is going to change in DCB's favor or not, it's not really going to be affecting the telemedia industry as such. It's just really making it easier for merchants to sell premium content and services, value-added services, in-app billing, which is which is the other focal point of the telemedia industry. So I don't necessarily see it as bad news. I agree with you. I think it's a potential disruptor for the sort of traditional DCB payment aggregators. But at the same time, as you also rightly point out, many of those DCB payment aggregators have been talking about and talking with open banking solution providers right from the get-go. So I would suspect that it would just be a sort of
I think you need a mixture of payment types depending on what you're selling, what markets you're operating in. So I think it's not going to be an either or, but it may well sort of take a dent some of DCB's gains. So interestingly, this went live this morning. So
you're getting into the habit now, aren't you?
I'm going to just throw this in. It's sort of related. Uber, who do and have long done sort of embedded payments, they've recently signed up with Bango to build in Uber One, which is Uber's sort of loyalty scheme. So you get sort of all sorts of benefits if you pay across like Uber and Uber Eats and all those sorts of things. That they've bundled this in with Bango's digital vending machine, and the idea is that they're going to offer this Uber One thing as part of a bundle of benefits with network operators. So it's part of like, you probably get them from your network operator or from ones who are trying to poach you, that like sign up with us and you'll get access to Disney, or you'll get this, that, and the other. Yeah. It's that sort of offering out in the US. This is currently, and interestingly, what this is that Uber do embedded payments, but what this will be is that you'll get your Uber One subscription through a super bundle with your network operator that you'll pay for using carrier billing. So actually, it's sort of the two things are both happening potentially at the same time. So it's not necessarily an either or.
What a
So
great
yeah,
that
interesting. That is actually finally a story about actual super bundling that's actually happening as well. We've talked about super bundling quite a lot. Now finally there is actually an example. So there you go. That
is
went
there
up.
an infographic you can share on how that
I
works?
don't have an infographic. I just banged up the story late yesterday, so that's up on our website. The link will appear in the description below
Make sure.
when you come to look at this. So that's worth a read, and something obviously we'll look into in much more detail in the coming weeks.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Well, all our viewers, please do make sure you take a regular visit to telemediaonline.co.uk, which is where Paul posts all of the news and all of the features. And you can join many hundreds of thousands of other people that do that on a regular basis, which is also a good reason why, if your banner is not on that site, you should maybe give me a call and see how to get your brand on on this very, very busy and very highly rated website. Okay, well, thanks for that,
Or
Paul.
indeed sponsor this podcast.
Or you could sponsor this podcast. Yeah, you could take over in sales anytime you like, mate. So, well, thanks for that. Let's. It wouldn't be a Studio 8.1 without us talking about fraud, of course. We've got some good news coming out of Egypt, and this is how Telecom Egypt drove a 90% reduction in incoming scam calls with a voice firewall. The story reads, since Egypt's primary telecom operator, deployed ENIA's voice firewall to protect against scam calls and unwanted robocalls, more than 90% of incoming calls with spoofed caller IDs have now disappeared from its network, which is very, very good news. Now, we talked a little bit about robocalls and the potential, well, the potential marketing benefits, but also the potential threats for fraud. I mean, I don't think this is just about robocalls. I think it's all kinds of scammy services. We don't like that in the telemedia industry. Unfortunately, they are rife across the globe. But this is a good news story because I think probably Egypt was not scoring highly, was it, in the Impello fraud report that we talked about a few weeks ago?
No, it was one of the sort of more troubled markets. It has been on and off for a number of years, but yeah, they have made great strides in combating sort of all kinds of telecoms fraud. The latest being this example at Telecom Egypt. It's particularly about spoofed calls, where I mean it's a problem everywhere. It's not just in Egypt, where you get a phone call that appears to be from someone legitimate, like your bank or whatever, because they hijack and spoof the identity. In fact, weirdly enough, this happened to my mother while we were recording the last podcast 2 weeks ago here in the UK, not in Egypt. But yeah, so really, it's just a great example, I thought, of a just success story in fighting fraud, where they put in a voice firewall, which obviously uses AI, as does everything, to try and identify these things, and has cut by 90% the sort of levels of voice scam fraud in Egypt or on Telecom Egypt's network, which is hugely significant. So yeah, it's an interesting common problem, because we talk a lot about the sort of DCB fraud. We've talked a lot about kind of the like some really intricate and difficult sort of to get your head around frauds, but this is a really sort of simple fraud 101, and they battle those sorts of things, and you clean up a vast amount of the market. So yeah, great opportunity there for Egypt, as it's cleaned up its market considerably, and a great sort of shout out to the sort of technology companies that prevent fraud, that they are constantly doing battle with these people, and sometimes winning.
Well, I mean, as we've said before, I mean, and as many of the anti-fraud cybersecurity providers in our space talk about, it's a moving target. So let's hope that in 2 weeks' time, the headline isn't Telecom Egypt's incoming scam calls goes up by 90% because the fraudsters have found a way around the firewall. But that's fingers crossed for that. But it does illustrate the point that it is vitally important that anybody operating in this space has got a very robust strategy when it comes to fighting fraud. And as we've said many times before, we're very lucky to have some excellent companies in our space that support World Telemedia, not least Evina. And this is the point where we draw everyone's attention to the fact that over the last couple of years, we've started to do short video interviews at the shows. That's the 8.1 live event in Barcelona, and of course World Telemedia. And it is really nice to see and hear, the talking heads of the people that are actually at the coalface fighting fraud on the telemedia industry's behalf. And so it is nice to draw attention to, and I think there again will be a link with the video interview that you did with the CCO Farid Taha from Evina, why we attend telemedia year after year. So if you are unsure, then don't take our word for it. Just talk to Farid, because he will explain exactly why World Telemedia is that sort of melting pot and that dynamic business environment where really strong partnerships can be created and cemented, and where people can share information, very important information about what the fraudsters are up to, and how you can keep your business as clear as possible, or as protected as possible in these difficult times. So good interview that, Paul, with Farid.
Yeah. And of course the guys from MENA who did the voice firewall for Telecom Egypt, you know where we are. Do get in touch. You too.
Indeed.
Be at the event.
They really should. They really should. That would be nice to hear from them, actually. So, yes, do please get in touch. Also on there, so we're going to talk a little bit now about some of the highlights from World Telemedia. We're on the cusp of announcing some really big stuff, particularly with regards to conference partnerships, but I can't quite say anything yet. But needless to say, an enormous ad network is going to be very heavily involved, I think, this year. They were heavily involved last year, but I think they're going to be really heavily involved this year. But I can't say any more than that. But I would just like to say thank you very much to our friends at Blazon for confirming this week. And also there is a link to Blazon on the website, who are, of course, the experts in helping you expand your network in the Middle East and North Africa. And we've talked a lot about the MENA region over the last, well, again, 2-3 years, haven't we? It's an enormous potential market. We're seeing year on year significant increases in the number of attendees, but now this year particularly the number of exhibitors and sponsors coming from that region. In honor of that, Paul, I don't know if you've picked up on my my Vaz on the beach banner, which when I opened it up in my office, lots of sand fell out over my office.
Fantastic.
Which was nice. And I'm sorry to all the other sponsors that they can't quite be seen. We did give everyone a big shout out last week. But needless to say, World Telemedia is a global business, and the focus, the network expands right the way around the globe. So it doesn't really matter whether you're looking to do business in South America, Central America, Europe, Southeast Asia, MENA, Africa. Marbella is the place to be. And having companies like Blazon is a great example of proof of that. And equally, I can announce that we are currently looking and taking bookings from Bankai Group, who are making a welcome return. Horizon, the messaging giants, have also confirmed that they will be in World Telemedia. So again, a great opportunity to talk to them about RCS. Platin Telecom, good old IPRN, which is still alive and kicking and doing very well. So we're delighted to have Platin back. Some news from Tim Wee Tech, a giant of the industry, and I think they are likely to be making their first appearance as an exhibitor. So there's been a lot of activity this week, which I'm very pleased to say. I can confidently tell you, Paul, that the exhibition will 100% be sold out. Certainly by the show, but I mean, could even be by the end of July. So please do get in touch. And you can always go to the wtevent.com website, go to the exhibitor page, scroll down, and you'll see the floor plan, you'll see all the exhibitors. And of course, on the 8.1 platform, you can currently visit the virtual World Telemedia event exhibition page, where all the exhibitors, all the sponsors, and all the signed up attendees are already getting listed there. So you can do your research in advance, you can connect in advance, which means by the time you get to Marbella, not only will you have a very full diary of meetings, but perhaps more importantly, you're able to qualify those meetings in advance rather than get to Marbella and find yourself having a meeting with somebody that you're politely thinking in the back of your head, this isn't going to work. So that's the kind of level of support that we are very happy to give you, and we would encourage you to take advantage of. Paul, I
Absolutely.
think that's it. Have you got anything else to add?
I think that's it. I think that
AOB.
as if that wasn't enough.
It's quite enough. It's quite enough. Well, look, listen, thank you everybody for watching and listening. We hope that the last sort of 25 minutes or so, could even be longer, has been of some value. Once again, as I say, please do pay regular visits to telemediaonline.co.uk. And also, whilst you're there, make sure that you have recently subscribed to receive the magazine, which will be coming out and being delivered by the postal service in hard copy in the next couple of weeks. So it might not be too late to get your copy delivered to your office. So Paul, listen, I think it's time to hit the sunbeds, isn't it?
I think so. I'm going back out. I'm going back outside. I've been at my desk many hours. I'm
Far
going
too long.
outside into the rare sunshine here in the UK.
There
For those of you listening in Europe, this is just standard.
Well, look, thanks very much, mate. I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. And in the meantime, stay hydrated and put plenty of sun cream on.
Absolutely. And happy voting to all of those people across Europe who have elections coming up.
Exactly. Disaster. Cheerio, everyone. Thanks a lot for watching.
Adios.